Hello students, myself Amrita Dhar, Assistant Professor of Electrical Engineering Department of Greater Kolkata College of Engineering and Management, JIS Group.
Video I will discuss about laws of illumination and different types of lamp. This topic is included in module 1 of the subject utilization, traction, heating and drives. Subject code is EE-S5-UTHD. So let's start. This video I will discuss about inverse square law of illumination. Inverse square law of illumination. Okay. Now let I be the luminous intensity of a point. I be the luminous intensity of a point source expressed in lumen per steradian. Lumen per steradian. And let omega be the solid angle. Now I draw a picture so you can understand better. This is the solid angle omega. The distance from center to this point is R1 and from center to this point is R2. Now total light flux in omega steradian is equals to I omega. Okay, total light flux in omega steradian is equals to I omega. Now area of the surface at a radius R1 is denoted by suppose A1. So A1 is equals to R1 square into omega. A1 is equal to R1 square into omega. Similarly, area of surface at radius R2 is denoted by A2 and A2 is equals to R2 square by omega. Now illumination at surface of radius R1 is equals to E1 equals to I omega, that is total flux, by R1 square into omega, that is area at surface radius R1. Okay, now this equals to I by R square. Now similarly this is for area 1, that is for radius R1. Similarly at radius R2 the illumination at surface E2 is equals to I omega, that is total light flux, by area at radius 2 R2 square into omega. Omega and omega is cancel out and we get E2 equal to R2 I by R2 square. So we can write E1 by E2 is equals to R2 square by R1 square. Okay, so this equation shows that illumination at a point is inversely proportional to square of its distance from point source. Okay, now and directly proportional to the luminous intensity or candle power of the source of light in that direction. That means E1 is proportional to I is the luminous intensity, and E1, that is illumination, is inversely proportional to R1 square. R1 is the distance from the point where we calculate the illumination from the center position. Okay, so this is the inverse square law of illumination. Next one is the cosine law. Next one is the cosine law. Okay, now it is our everyday's experience that intensity of illumination due to sun at midday is more than that either early in the morning or in the evening, and this is due to the fact that at midday the rays of sun falling on the earth's surface are normal or very much so, and in the evening and morning the rays are inclined at a much lesser angle. Now let us analyze it quantitatively. Now first I draw a diagram. Suppose this is point P. This angle is theta. This point is denoted by B, and this angle is also theta. This angle is also theta. This distance is H. Okay, and this point is denoted by O, and this is solid angle omega. Now let P be the point source at height h from the plane containing the surface C D. Sorry, this point is D, which sustains solid angle omega at the source of the light. Now let AB be the surface perpendicular to OP. AB is the surface perpendicular. This point is A. Now let AB is the surface perpendicular to OP. OP. Okay, now illumination of area AB, that is EAB, is equals to I omega by area of AB. This is clear, and which is okay. And we can write this I equals to area of AB by omega, and this is equals to R square. R square. So EAB is equals to I by R square. Similarly, illumination of area CD is equals to ECD. Similarly, I into omega by area of CD, and this is equals to I by area of CD by omega, and this is equals to area of CD, area of CD is equals to area of AB by cos theta. Okay, now this is equals to, so we can write ECD is equals to I by area of AB by cos theta into omega. Okay, now this is equals to I, and this is equals to R square, so I into cos theta by R square, or we can write I by R square is EAB into cos theta. So it follows that the illumination at a point on a surface is proportional to the cosine of the angle which ray makes with the normal to the surface at that point. Okay, now next we discuss about some electric lamp. Now light sources are usually divided into two classes: incandescent sources and luminescent sources. An incandescent source is one which emits light solely because of its high temperature, example a tungsten lamp, whereas a luminescent source emits light due to ionization and excitation independent of the temperature, example mercury vapor lamp, neon lamp, sodium vapor lamp and firefly. Now these sources usually radiate only at certain wavelengths. Now first we discuss about tungsten lamp. Tungsten lamp. Okay. Now it has been observed that a black body is the most efficient radiator as it emits energy at every wavelength. A black body, when heated to 6250 degrees centigrade, it emits its maximum energy with the visible spectrum. Even though it is not possible to realize a perfect black body, the materials used for lamp filament approach it very closely. Now tungsten, with its melting point at 3500 degrees centigrade, is now universally adopted as a material for incandescent lamp. The safe working temperature of such a filament is 3000 degrees centigrade. The cold resistance of the filament is approximately 1/6 of its hot resistance. Okay, cold resistance is 1/6 of its hot resistance. Now the filament resistance increases almost instantaneously, about 0.2 seconds, An inert gas, usually a combination of nitrogen and argon, is filled in the bulbs, which results in a possibility of working the filament at higher temperature without any fear of oxidation and evaporation of the filament on account of pressure exerted by the gas. Usually bulbs with rating 40 watt and above are gas filled, whereas below 40 watt they are vacuum filled, vacuum type. Vacuum type. And above 40 watt they are gas filled. Okay. Now, since the use of gas-filled tungsten lamps, slightly improvements have been made in the design of the filament, such as the use of a coiled or helical filament instead of a straight wire, and finally a coiled coil filament in which the single helix is coiled again on itself. Now, the coiled coil filament can be worked at a relatively higher temperature. As a result of the output per watt increases and the loss due to convection decreases. The efficacy in lumens per watt increases as the size of wattage of the lamp increases. Now, if the working voltage is marginally greater than the rated voltage, more light output is obtained but result in shorter life of the lamp. Operation of the filament at a voltage lower than the rated results in loss of light. Okay. Now, electric discharge in a gas at low pressure. When an electric current flows between two electrodes in a gas at approximately 1 mm pressure, the cathode ray glow is produced very closely to the cathode, followed by the cathode dark space and a bright region to some extent called negative glow. Beyond this are the Faraday dark space and the luminous positive column. Now, first I draw the picture so you can understand better. This is positive column. This is Faraday dark space. This is negative glow. This one is cathode. this one is anode. Okay. This one is cathode, this one is anode. This one is cathode, dark space, and this is cathode glow. Okay. So when an electric current flows between electrodes, okay, in a gas approximately 1 mm pressure, cathode glow is produced very closely to the cathode, and followed by cathode dark space, Faraday's dark space, and the luminous positive column. Okay. Now, a decrease in pressure causes the cathode dark space, I mean this area, to expand until it can be made to fill the whole tube. And an increase in pressure causes the positive column to expand. And in many of the commercial lamps, the positive column fill almost the whole tube. Now, if the cathode is heated so that it gives an adequate supply of electrons, the voltage drop at the cathode is low. Thus, hot cathode lamps such as sodium lamp and the mercury vapor lamp using mercury pool are essentially low voltage devices. In cold cathode lamps, the voltage drop at the cathode must be greatly increased to perhaps 10 times the ionization potential. And this high drop accelerates the positive ions towards the cathode and gives them sufficiently kinetic energy so that they bombard the cathode, they liberate electrons. And in order to reduce power loss at the cathode, a long lamp is required, which in turn necessitates a higher operating voltage for these lamps. And the bombardment of the cathode also causes its gradual disintegration with consequent blackening of the tube, and there is a tendency for cleanup of the gas with result in reduction in the life of the lamp. Next, we discuss about sodium vapor lamp. Next is sodium vapor lamp. First, now a sodium vapor lamp consists of an inner bulb of special gas containing the sodium and the inert gas either neon or argon, and the pressure is 1.5 mm and is fitted with 2 filaments, and this is enclosed in a larger bulb which is evacuated to prevent the escape of heat as much as possible. Now, the efficacy of the bulb is high as the radiation from it are the yellow sodium lines which are near the maximum of the visibility curve, and the normal operating temperature of the tube is around 300 degree centigrade. A small transformer, as you can see in the picture, is included in the circuit for heating the cathode and a choke for stabilizing the discharge. Okay, now to begin with, the discharge starts in the inert gas, and the temperature of the lamp increases gradually until the sufficient metallic vapor is present to conduct the current. And since the ionization potential of the metal vapor is low, it will carry nearly all the current, and the spectrum of the inert gas will practically disappear soon. And thus the bulb starts as a neon lamp and then gradually changes from red to yellow as the temperature rises. And because of the monochromatic yellow light which makes the object appear as grey, these lamps are used for street light and highway lighting. Okay. Next is mercury vapor lamp. So, the mercury vapor lamp is similar in construction to sodium vapor lamp and consists of a double gas bulb. And since the cathode is maintained in an incandescent state by ionic bombardment, no heating circuit is required. The operation of the mercury vapor lamp at low mercury vapor pressure gives blue light and a high proportion of the ultraviolet rays and hence are unsatisfactory. A more recent development is a high pressure 122 atmospheric mercury lamp in which a small but careful measured drop of mercury is introduced in the bulb and the vapor pressure rises until all the mercury is vaporized when the light given out is with a bluish tint. Here also an inert gas is introduced for initial discharge of the mercury. When the mercury vapor lamp is in use and say it goes out, it will not restart until it has been cooled down and the vapor pressure fallen to a value sufficiently low to allow restriking of the discharge in the inert gas. The overall efficacy of the bulb is approximately 35 lumen per watt and the power factor is 0.65. Now a still more recent development in the mercury vapor lamp is an ultra pressure lamp operating at 40 atmosphere and has an efficiency comparable with the sodium vapor lamp, and these lamps are used for outdoor and industrial lighting. Okay, next is fluorescent lamp. This is supply, this is capacitor, this is choke, this is also a capacitor, radio suppression. So this is the diagram of fluorescent lamp. The mercury vapor lamp operating at low pressure emit radiation at about 2500 angstrom, while at a high pressure they emit radiation of about 3650 angstrom. Since both the emission are in the ultraviolet region, are of number of use as source of light. However, this radiation can be used to excite certain materials. When the excited molecules of this material return to normal, they emit a radiation at a frequency different from that which caused the excitation, and thus radiation emitted by the material may be within the visible zone, so that ultraviolet radiation are converted to light, and the materials which possess this property is called fluorescent. Now the fluorescent lamp is in the form of a tube to 3 to 5 centimeters. in diameter of 0.5 meter to 1.5 meter long, with an electrode at each end, which are in the form of coiled filament coated with powder. As the operating temperature of the tube is approximately 50 degrees centigrade. No outer tube is required. A series choke for stabilizing the discharge and a shunt capacitor across the supply terminal for improvement of the power factor are used with the tube. The lagging power factor is due to choke only, and sometimes a small capacitor 0.05 microfarad is connected across the tube to suppress the radio interference, as the tube draws non-sinusoidal current from the supply on account of characteristics of discharge. When the supply is switched on, the starter provides a path through the electrodes, and the choke is choke to provide preheating. Okay, and the starter switch then opens automatically, thereby current is interrupted. Since this heating current reduces to zero value instantaneously in the choke circuit, also the choke field collapses, which releases stored energy and thus produces a high voltage between electrodes and causes pre-ionized tube to strike. Mainly there are two types of starter switch: glow starter switch and thermal starter switch. The glow starter switch consists of a pair of bimetal contacts sealed in a small glass bulb filled with argon gas. When the supply is switched on, the total supply voltage appears across the open contacts, and thereby an arc discharge takes place between the contacts, and the heat from the contacts extinguishes the arc, thereby the bimetal contacts cool and open the lamp outside the glass bulb. The glass bulb is usually mounted on a plastic base and inserted into a small cylindrical metal canister. The base has metal studs or pins coming out from it, which are connected to bimetal contacts. An insulated socket is mounted in the control gear house to receive the metal studs of the starter switch, so that it may be connected into the control gear circuit. So this is all about glow starter switch. Now thermal starter switch. A thermal starter switch has almost similar appearance to a glow starter switch, except that it employs a relatively larger size of the canister. And this also has a pair of bimetal stripes, which are initially closed rather than open as in case of glow starter, and the contacts along with the starter coil are enclosed in a glass bulb, and the bulb is filled with a gas to improve the thermal link between the heater coil and the contacts. When the supply is switched on, the current flows through the choke and the starter heater and the electrodes. The heater coil raises the temperature of the bimetal contacts and they separate. Thereby, the current through the choke is interrupted, and the consequent voltage pulses approximately 1000 volt causes the tube to strike. Once the tube strikes, the tube current flows through the starter heater and bimetal contacts remain open. Now, fluorescent discharge lamp may be operated on a DC supply also, and this requires the use of a resistive ballast for arc stability in addition to choke for producing the voltage pulse, and the resistive ballast introduces very high power loss in the ballast. Also, the migration of positively charged mercury ions towards the cathode result in low light output from the anode end and of the tube, and for this reason, whenever the tube is to be used on DC, a reversing switch is normally used in the circuit to change the direction of the current through the tube every few hours. So it is usually preferred to use inverter circuit whenever DC supply is available. The frequency is usually 10 kHz. With the advent of power transistor, this method of operation of tubes is extensively used in trains, buses and aircrafts.
That's all from today's class. If you have any problem, please contact with me. My contact details is given on the first slide. Thank you.